The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised. A looming blame. A confession soaked in cyanide. Everything pointed inward, everything pointed back. In that split second, decades of fragmented memories clicked into place. His psychopathic orchestration of pain, his narcissistic command and control, his antisocial disregard, all of it crystallized in those few sentences. He left behind no apology, only a challenge, a curse, a legal ghost that was thrown into my lap. From the Tylenol Murders, A Father's Confession to His Son by Joseph Cibelli. Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. This is a very special episode today on a series of murders that radiated sheer terror across the United States. I remember it all too well. Today's guest, author Joseph Cibelli, he remembers too. His new book is The Tylenol Murders, A Father's Confession to His Son. And he's the son. So brace yourself for this one, murder bookies. Joseph and I left no stone unturned. Being honest with you, I approached Joseph Cibelli's new book with a healthy amount of skepticism. I mean, you know I follow the evidence. By the time I finished reading it, I was highly impressed by the litany of facts and circumstantial evidence cited, and by Joseph Cibelli's earnest effort to research his own past. This past was punctuated by fear, pain, and anger, as domestic violence and child abuse lived side by side with him and his two siblings and his mother, all victims of his father, Daniel Droz's psychopathy. At the end of his life, Daniel Droz confessed, quote, "Cyanide pills? I did it," end quote, triggering a cascade of researching, digging, calling, asking, confronting. Could Joseph's father really be the Tylenol killer? The case is unsolved after all. Well, that's a big question. I remember when this went down, my mom tossed all the Tylenol out. My friend Jan, well, actually, you guys might know Jan. She does www.jusaskjan.com. She does my merch. She also does Joseph Scott Morgan's body bags, Zone 7's Cheryl McCollum, along with many of the podcasts that we all love. Jan, she grew up on the southwest side of Chicago, and I asked her what she remembers, and this is what she said. I was 12 years old when the Tylenol murders occurred, and it was just a few years after the bodies were found in the home of John Wayne Gacy, so everyone was still on edge. But this was very different. This was random and terrifying, because we did not know who would be the next victims. News anchors on all the major networks were telling us to throw away bottles of extra-strength Tylenol that we had at home, while store shelves were being emptied of the product. Each day, my parents would read the Chicago Sun-Times and watch the evening news, hoping to hear that the individual responsible was caught, but that news never came. The story was eventually pushed aside for more pressing news. And we kids, too young to really understand the magnitude of it, began to think that this was just another boogeyman lurking in the shadows. A boogeyman, an unknown phantom who rained death upon random, completely innocent people who simply had a headache, didn't feel good. You know, when terrible things happen, we always think that somebody knows something. Somebody noticed something, but just didn't realize the significance yet. We ask them to think back to such and such a time or such and such a date. Well, in this case, Joseph Cibelli is that guy. He did know something. He knew something was off. He knew his father's behavior was off, even for Daniel Droz. And that behavior was perfectly in line with what you'd expect a mass murder to behave like. Now, for a bit of context about Joseph Cibelli, in addition to publishing his first book, Joseph spent 30 years as a successful entrepreneur doing hair. He went back to school, earning his BS in criminal justice and his PhD in forensic psychology. And he's not done. He's currently in law school. All very significant accomplishments. So for those not old enough to remember the Tylenol murders, here we go. Late September into early October 1982, people living in the suburbs around Chicago suddenly began feeling bad, collapsing into seizures and respiratory failure, dying. Wednesday, September 29, 1982, Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Seventh grader at Adams Junior High School, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, had awakened with a cold, feeling crappy, and stayed at home from school. While hearing a noise, Mary was found unconscious at 7 a.m., and she passed away before the ambulance could get her to the hospital. Her family utterly traumatized at her loss, and doctors couldn't explain what happened. Now, reflecting back on 1982, Kasia Janis has spoken over the decades about losing 3 members of her immediate family on the same day. In Jewell, Illinois, Kasia's dad, Adam, a postal worker, picked her up from preschool, and despite having a headache, he made a pit stop to pick up flowers for his wife and some Tylenol for himself. Arriving home, Adam gave his wife the flowers and took 2 Tylenol. Shortly afterward, Adam wasn't feeling well and collapsed in convulsions. Running for help, neighbors called 911. At 27 years old and in good health, doctors suspected Adam had died of a heart attack. Absolutely devastated, Uncle Stanley, age 25, and his new bride, Aunt Teresa, age 19, were just back from their honeymoon in Hawaii, and they came over right away. Stanley, he had a backache, and Teresa had a headache. And then it happened again. Stanley collapsed, with Teresa upset and crying, and then she collapsed herself. Paramedics arrived back at the same house where Adam died earlier. Fearful of what was going on in that house, they placed it in quarantine until investigators could figure out what was happening. Trying to uncover the causes of death, a nurse named Helen Jensen looked around the house, and she noticed the receipt for the Tylenol and a new bottle with 6 pills missing. Quote, "There were 6 capsules missing, and there were 3 people dead. And I said, it's got to be the Tylenol." End quote. Skeptical at first, the lab tech smelled almonds, and blood tests later confirmed that there was cyanide in the Tylenol capsules. Then investigators learned Mary Kellerman's mom had given her Tylenol to ease her cold symptoms. Before officials and Johnson & Johnson could recall extra-strength Tylenol, the poison capsules would kill 3 others. Happily married to Ed, 27-year-old Mary Renner had taken some extra-strength Tylenol to help with postpartum discomfort, as she had just given birth to her 4th child. And then Mary died. She had loved playing softball and the drums and bowling. Then, on October 30th, 31-year-old Illinois Bell Telephone Company employee from Elmhurst, Illinois, Mary McFarland, developed a headache. She headed into the back room to take a Tylenol, and she would collapse and die. She left behind 2 sons, Ryan and Bradley. A granddaughter she has never met bears the middle name Mary in her honor. And her brother, Jack Eliason, has never again taken a Tylenol, not in all the years since Mary's death. Quote, "I had a hard time for a long time even looking at a Tylenol box on the shelf. I've become overly cautious," end quote, he told the Boston Herald. 35-year-old United Airlines flight attendant, Paula Prince, was on a flight from Las Vegas to Chicago O'Hare Airport. Landing, she bought a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol at Walgreens, and Paula Prince was found next to this open bottle by her friends and coworkers who knew that something was amiss when Paula didn't show up for work, and she was buried in Omaha, Nebraska. And there was a near miss. Linda Morgan, wife of the DuPage County Judge Lewis Morgan, heard about the warnings about Tylenol and turned her bottle in for analysis. 7 of the extra-strength pills were laced with cyanide. In all, 8 bottles were identified as poisoned. Other than taking Tylenol, the victims had nothing in common with each other. Given that criminal profiling was relatively new, FBI agent Roy Lane focused on the behavioral characteristics of the unknown killer. Working timer for Tylenol murders, the FBI name for the investigation, Lane believed the killer was likely a man. Quote, "There's a great likelihood that this person who is responsible thinks he got away with this. He has tricked law enforcement, and it's very much of a high. But over time, that high is going to diminish," end quote, Lane said. Now, retired FBI behavioral profiler John Douglas, he concurred that the perpetrator was male, probably someone who abused animals and was violent in his past. He categorized the killer as an assassin type who derives satisfaction from the act of planning and executing the crime, though he's not one to engage in a direct physical confrontation. Key traits Douglas attributed to the killer included white male in his late 20s or 30s, depressed, nocturnal loner driven by intense rage and feelings of inadequacy, despair, and impotence, fueled by a long list of personal failure in employment, education, and relationships. The killer likely felt that society has maligned him unfairly, and he may have a history of gravitating towards positions of pseudo-authority, such as a security guard or an auxiliary firefighter. And Douglas also believes that the murders were triggered by a major life stressor in mid-September 1982, such as the loss of job or a parent or a partner. Johnson & Johnson cooperated with the law enforcement investigation. Facing financial ruin, J&J made the decision that is still studied in economics and business schools today. They recalled every bottle of extra-strength Tylenol in the United States, 31 million bottles worth over $100 million. Production halted and advertisements came down. Warnings and flyers went out. They had to restore faith in their product, and they redesigned their packaging. In 1982, no bottle or packaged product had safety seals, because who would think such a thing was necessary? Anyone could unscrew a cap, reach inside, tamper with the contents, and put it back. And that is exactly what the Tylenol poisoner had done, exploiting this security flaw. A permanent change that resulted from these murders was the passage of the Tylenol bill, which made it a federal offense to tamper with products, with the FDA establishing tamper-proof guidelines for consumer products. The safety seal concept spread globally as well. So all of those safety tabs, tape, and glue on packages all over the world is a direct result from the Tylenol cyanide deaths. J&J also received an extortion demand, and this was eventually traced to a Chicago area travel agency, which tied the letter to a disgruntled employee, Robert Richardson. And he and his wife left Chicago just before the murders, moving to Texas. An investigator recognized Richardson as actually being James Lewis. Lewis, who had previously been arrested for a heinous murder involving dismemberment, but had the charges dropped because the police had failed to read him his Miranda rights. Lewis remained the prime suspect in the Tylenol murders, but the police could not make the case. He did serve over 10 years for the extortion plot. Subsequent investigations and advancement in DNA technology found no match between Lewis and the DNA found on the Tylenol bottles. and James Lewis died in 2023, never charged for the Tylenol deaths. But someone else was dying in 2023, and that was Daniel Raymond Droz, who was suffering from pancreatic cancer. Droz told two different people that he was, in fact, the spree killer the authorities had been hunting since the fall of 1982. So let me introduce you to his son, our author, Joseph Cibelli. Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I know the catalyst for this, but why did you turn your story into a book?
I can answer that very thoroughly, actually. So on my father's deathbed, when he said a few things on his deathbed, and it was, first of all, was cyanide pills. I did it. And he said it a second time, I think, in case you didn't hear him the first time. And when he said that, the hair on the back of my neck just stood up, and I thought, I've known this all along. I suspected him in 1982 of this, and I carried it with me. So what I wanted to do was come up with what I did first was I started a timeline of events. Now, this timeline that I have in the book, super accurate. And I had actually, at one point in about 1986, I started writing all of this down in a journal. And at the end of the book in about 1988, that journal goes missing. So for me, I thought, I just got my PhD in December. I finished that, and I'm in law school. I just started my fourth year of law school. It's a 4-year program. And I just know from experience, like document. So I started documenting it. And as I was putting down my timeline and lining everything up with the murders, it was like 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 did not equal 3 in this. It crossed over so perfectly. It was like you could lay it on top of it. And then I thought, okay, I need to get all this in writing. And I had seen a question that you had popped over to me about working with authorities. So I thought, okay, I need this all in writing to take it to the authorities. So I had spoken with a niece. She's a survivor from this incident. It was 3 people who died in Arlington Heights. She was their niece. I tracked her down and I talked to her. And we had a good conversation, and there was a lot of tears on both sides. So I had the timeline started, and I had started putting everything together. And I asked her, in a way, I wanted to give her some power back. And I said, what do you want me to do with this information? And she said, please, 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 if you believe that your father did this, please contact the Arlington Heights Police Department, because they have what is called the Tylenol Task Force. So I had watched a documentary where they had said, yes, we have a Tylenol Task Force and we are constantly working on this case. So I hung up with her. I think it was at 2:13 in the afternoon. 2:21, I had the number for Arlington Heights Police Department. So 8 minutes later, 7 minutes later, I called them. I spoke with the gentleman who answered the phone. And I said, I need to talk to somebody in the Tylenol Task Force. I have some information. And he goes, well, we don't have a Tylenol Task Force. That case is over 40 years old. We don't have anybody working on that. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I saw in a documentary that you have a Tylenol Task Force. Nope, don't have one, but I can put you in touch with the detective. I said, okay, we'll start there. So he put me in touch with the detective, and I left a voicemail. They're probably standing there going like, cuckoo, cuckoo. And left him a voicemail, said, I've got information for this. Please call me. Never got a phone call back. So I gave the guy, I'm like a detective here. I was like, I'm giving him 48 hours. He's got 48 hours to call me back, or I'm calling again. So 48 hours later, I found a direct line for this detective. So I called on that, and it rang twice, and he put me into voicemail. And I thought, oh, okay, this is how this is going to go. So about a week, 8 days later, I think, I did get a call back from a different detective, and I told him what I had. And so he had sent me an email so I could email him what I have. So at that point, I reached out to my friend Kelly in Illinois. She's an attorney, and she had done criminal work prior. And I said, Kelly, she knew what was going on. And I said, I talked to Arlington Heights today. I got to come up with this timeline. Will you help me with this? And she's like, oh my God, yeah. She said, send me everything you have and we'll put together a timeline. So she was working on that. And then I kept writing in the book, and I had gotten the book to a point where it was like a book. I mean, it was actually like a book. And I sent her that, and she said, you know what? She said, just send him the whole thing. She said, send him everything you've got because everything in there is evidence. So I sent it to him, and I never really heard anything from him. So I kept in touch with them. I kept emailing, and I'm like, you know what? This is coming. And so whenever I would do an interview, I would send them the newspaper interview or the magazine interview. And I'd say, this is coming. We need to look at this. You really seriously need to look at this. And I got nothing. So I finished with the book. I had the book done just a couple of weeks, and then I signed with Wild Blue Press as my publisher. And, we just proceeded with the book. And I kept this detective in the loop with what's going on. And that's how I ended up writing a book, was because I felt like it needs to be documented. When I first started on this, I was looking for exculpatory evidence, anything that would say, he did not do this. He couldn't have done this. He wasn't even in town that week. He was here. He was there. I looked for everything, and I looked deep, and I dug, and I was extremely thorough. And at the end, I found every little street I went down pointed me in the direction right back to him. And I found some other things that he's got his fingerprints on that I'm working on now. Yeah, he was something. My father was definitely a psychopath.
Oh, yes.
And when I wrote the book, I've said this a few times now, when I put the book together, there's so many instances in our home of violence, and I put enough in the book to where people can get a picture of what he was like and what living with him was like. But what I have in the book is not an exhaustive list. That is just that there was so much more that went on behind the scenes, but I didn't want the book to be a litany of woes about me. What I wanted the book to be about was solving this. We've got him on his deathbed confessing it, and I've got everything lined up so perfectly. And the thing that really struck me was in 1982, I had this inkling. My father's behavior had changed so much over time. And I was out, I put it in the book. I was riding my bike, and I just had almost like a panic attack. And I was like, I got to get home and dump the Tylenol. I think there's Tylenol in our cabinet, and I got to dump it. I'm going to save my family. I go home, open up the cabinet. There's 2 bottles of Tylenol in there. And, they didn't have childproof caps or anything. You just pop the top, pull the cotton, and I just dumped it. And then I stood there and I said, why do we have 2 brand new bottles of Tylenol in our cabinet? Why haven't these been dumped? And I just had this vision. I was like, I think not only is he capable of this, I think he did this.
Whoa.
And the story in the book where he takes us to Bussy Woods, that is a profound part of the book, because in my opinion, and I know my father's brain because I observed him my whole life, I went into forensic psychology trying to understand this person and myself. And the day at Bussy Woods, it's very profound. Anybody who's reading it, really focus in on that Bussy Woods day. When we got back from Bussy Woods, my father was carrying my brother, and we got up the front stairs, and he looked down at me. He kind of just bent a little bit. I was pretty tall, and he just bent down a little bit, and he said, if you ever talk about anything that went down today, I will kill you, I will kill your mother, and I will kill your brother and sister. And that was right before the murder started happening. So in my 11-year-old mind, I'm realizing now, like, my father is capable. My father is 100% capable of doing this. I think he did it. And then when you start adding it all up, his lair and the pink cup that what he called kryptonite in there. I mean, and in all these places we went, when I pulled up a map of Bussy Woods, because I was determined, I spent about 8 days on Google Earth and driving around the perimeter of Bussy Woods, looking for the exact place where he left us in the woods, and I found it. So then when I found that, I was looking down from Google Earth, and you could see Bussy Woods. It's a big forest preserve. So when you're looking down, you see the forest preserve, and then immediately just on the south part of the perimeter, actually just right outside of Bussy Woods, is Elk Grove Village. And that's where the Mary Kellerman bottle was purchased. And then if you look across the highway, and I mean, you could walk there to Woodfield Mall from Bussy Woods. It's that close. That's where 2 bottles were found at an Osco drugstore, but nobody had died from that they know of. And then if you look to the north, almost right on the perimeter is Arlington Heights, and that was where the bottle was purchased to kill 3 people. It is all around these woods. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God. So I had spoken with my brother. My brother was only 3 at the time. He wasn't even 4 yet. And he remembers being in Bussey Woods. I mean, he has some memories of it, just very childlike memories. Like he remembers when we were sitting there, he saw a deer. I mean, these little things like that. My brother told me over the years, he would ask my father, why did you leave us in Bussey Woods that day? And he would never get an answer. And my father told me, and I put this in the book, he's like, I had some errands to run. And I was like, errands? What errands? We don't even live around here. I mean, we live, 45 minutes from there. What errands did you have to run? Because I was not afraid to confront him. And he's like, yes, smartass, I know we don't live out here, but you know what? They still have stores here. And that's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I'm so glad you talked about it because, I'm reading the book and I'm catching on to the amount of information that you have here. I'm saying, oh, he was setting up the alibi.
Totally. And what a great
kids.
alibi. He's with his kids. And terrifying part, Jill, that man, he had worked. Okay, so his full-time job was at a company called Electromotive. And then he was also in Lyons. He was a fireman. And then he morphed into the police department as well. Every incident where we were involved in, where he was leaving us places and we were going places, he had on his red Lyons Fire Department jacket. Who's going to question a guy with a fire department jacket on in the store by the Tylenol? Nobody's going to question that. People do not, especially in 1982, people had respect for authority figures, Nobody was going to question him. And then, the fail-safe was like, oh yeah, I got my kids here. It was just, hello. It was just mind-blowing when I started connecting all the dots. In all of the years since then, I've carried this in the back of my head. I'm like, not only do I know he's capable, but I think he did it. And then when he was dying and he said the things that he said on his deathbed, I was like, okay, I should have known. I should have known this. There was 2 very interesting things he said on his deathbed, as well as saying cyanide pills, I did it. One of them, and my brother was the one that heard this, and my brother just filed it away because he's like, it didn't make any sense to me. My brother wasn't grasping this until I started putting things together. My father sat up in his hospice bed. He was crying. And he said, this will give you chills. He said, the 3 Marys should still be here. One of them was so young.
Oh my God.
My brother was like, okay, he's just lost it. My brother kind of filed this away. And when I started putting the timeline together and I was conferring with my brother, he's like, wait a minute, do you know what else he said? And then he told me about the 3 Marys. My brother actually wrote it down that day because he thought, you know what? I don't know what this means, but maybe I'll have to look into this. And he wrote it down and he read it to me from his own writing. So I was like, oh my God. And the other thing that he said, and this was for me. He sat up in his bed and he's staring through the living room down into the hallway, just kind of blank stare. And he's talking to somebody or something that's not there. There's nobody there. And he said, this is just every time I say this, it just makes my skin get goosebumps. He said, if you saw what I did, you know what I did, and you don't say anything, you should be ashamed of yourself. You would be the monster. That was for me. He knew that I was going to figure this out. And then the other part of it too was he had told my brother, I know I'm going to be blamed for something, so I'm just going to admit it now. Then he said cyanide pills. I did it. It was me. So I just was like, wow, he carried this with him his whole life. I think he knew he was never get caught for it. So I just feel like, that is so solid right there. A deathbed declaration is so solid. It's almost bulletproof. And then lining up everything, everything lines up perfectly.
It does in my mind. I mean, I found the story very, very plausible. I did some research, as I always do. Not all of the profiles the FBI did on the Tylenol Killer have been released, but there are writings about it. And reading it, I was like checking off the list of things that applied to your dad? I don't know if you went down that rabbit hole, but I did.
Forensic psychology, I was very interested to see what kind of profiling the FBI did. The crazy part about this, when it comes to the FBI, was in 1982 when this happened, there was no federal anti-tampering act. So the FBI did not technically even have jurisdiction for this. They assisted. But Arlington Heights Police Department has the lead on this. And, the profiling that I read from the FBI, I did the exact same thing. I was like, check, 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 check. Oh, I'll be like, wait, but you forgot this. You forgot this one. Here, let me fill in this blank here. You forgot this. And my father, in his lair, that's what I call it, his workshop, I called it his lair, which had a door on it with a double-sided deadbolt. And then within that lair, he had built another lair. There was a wall that he had put up that was actually a door, and that was almost like another little small room. But the writings that he had in there, the biggest one to me was the poor man's James Bond. Mm-hmm. So all these years later, I had seen those, and they were like bulletins. They looked like a church bulletin at the time, and there were stacks of them. He had them all over in his workshop. So here it is, it's 2024, I believe, at this point, and I'm trying to find copies of the poor man's James Bond. And I did find some where they had taken all of the little bulletins and put it into a bound book. And there's 3 of those. So I bought them. I'm probably on the FBI's list, but I bought them. And as I read through page by page of this dark stories about how to kill people with this and how to do that and how to build this type of a bomb. But it's laid out in the poor man's James Bond. He writes in there about if you want to poison your enemy, get in their medicine cabinet, put cyanide in capsules. He says this, and that was from 1969, 1970, maybe 71. He wrote that. So, this was all laid out, and this was the literature my father was reading. It's like this was all planned out. This was like he was, and it just, I don't know. I sit back and I look and I'm like, I just cannot believe that was my father. And every time when I see a picture of the victims, I will cry because I look at them and I'm like, I am 100% certain my father killed you.
Yeah, that's weighty knowledge. It's
very heavy to carry. So when I started doing this research and started putting timelines together, I have a husband, and we've been together since 2002. And when I started this, he's like, I support you. He's like, I believe everything. He knew my father. He's like, this does not even surprise me. This doesn't even shock me one bit. But he said, you need to have a therapist to go through this with, because this is dark. And there were dark days writing this to where I had to just close the computer, press save, close the computer and walk away for a while because it was so dark, and reliving some of these memories. And, we were always basically taught, like, you know what? None of this stuff happened. Us getting beat up by our father, him beating up. No, that didn't happen. That never happened. And we lived our lives that way. So to actually address it and look at it and be like, yes, this happened and that happened. And then, my brother was closer with my father. My brother had to kind of look through that lens as well after my father died and be like, you know what? None of this was normal. And I wrote about that in the book. It still hits me. None of this was normal. I was in my 50s before I realized, you know what? Not everybody's father holds a loaded gun to their head. It's not everybody's father that pistol whips their mother and gives her a concussion. There's so many things, like I said, that were not in the book. But I had to realize, like, none of this is normal. Living with this man, none of it was normal. And now realizing what he did and other things that he was involved in, I'm sure of, unfortunately, I'm not even shocked by it. I'm kind of numbed from it because it's so horrible and it's so dark.
Well, it was hard reading about what your childhood was like. In all honesty, it was really hard to read that. I also noted the intensity with which you were observing him, that hypervigilance that kids will when you're aware of a predator, when you're aware that you're in danger, that you're walking around on eggshells, that you're coming home. Who's there? Is it regular Dan or evil Dan?
Correct.
Oh my gosh, I was with you. That's how good your book is, because you would come home from school, or you would go down the staircase, or you would walk through that room, and I felt like I was standing right next to you.
Thank you.
And I'm peeking as you're like looking and like, oh, he's here.
I know. And that hypervigilance, that, I've lived my life since I would say about the age of 7 is when I really started becoming hypervigilant. It was a survival technique. And I've lived my life in that fight or flight mode. And now, I'm going on 55 now, and I'm just now learning, like, I don't have to live in fight or flight. There's an option in between the two to be able to just enjoy life. And I have enjoyed my life, but I was hyper, I've worked, I owned businesses. I went back to school. I got a degree. I got a PhD. I'm almost done with my law degree. And, talking with my therapist, he's like, that is because you lived in fight or flight for so long. You thrive on that rush of like, I got to go to school. I got to get this done. I got a paper to write. I've got a test to take. And he said, you've done so much with it and you've used it for good. But he said, when you're done with law school, you need to be able to just sit back and say, I've done all of this and learn to live life. So we're working on that now. I'm learning how to not live in a fight or flight mode. And it's been challenging. I mean, it really has been. You would think like it wouldn't be challenging, but it really is.
No, your brain is wired that way.
Always.
So
always,
it's like you
always.
have to untangle that learning.
Yes.
And it's hard.
It'll take me the rest of my life. I mean, honestly, I'll be dealing with this the rest of my life. And, I've told my brother has had his issues in life because of how we were raised. I mean, he has been on drugs. He's done so many things and he is sober and he is clean now. And I just, we talk every day and I am like, you know what, no matter what happens, I am right here for you. And I'm trying to teach him the lessons that I've learned now on how to undo this type of thinking and this type of living. And I'll tell you what, this book was a horrible thing to have to write, but the relationship that I have with my brother now is worth it because we've never had a relationship. He was definitely team Dan. And after my father died and I was coming out with this book, I mean, he just lost it. And then he's like, wait a minute, there's stuff that I know. And so then we collaborated and worked together and put the rest of it together. And I'll tell you, we have a great relationship now. And I am so happy about that because, my sister died. My sister died in 2013. And my sister, I would call her, she was my ride or die. I was in a bar fight and I needed backup. Liz, I need you down here. She'd be there, but I didn't have that kind of a relationship with my brother, but now I do. And it's all been because I forced everybody to look at the truth. My mother, my brother, everybody, I made everybody sit there and read this book. This is what happened. For years, my mom would be like, oh, I don't remember him being that horrible. It wasn't that bad. And now she's like, oh my God, it was horrible. I mean, she's actually realizing it now, what she was living in.
Well, you know how powerful denial is.
Yes. Yeah. Not just a river in Egypt.
Exactly. And I was to say, your brother being on Team Dan, that was his defense mechanism.
Absolutely. He needed that to survive. He needed
survival.
To survive. And my father knew that. My father knew that he controlled my brother like a puppet master. And, my brother, he was not aware of that, or he was aware of it. And it was just like you said, it was a survival mechanism and he needed that. But now that our father's out of the way and we're dealing with the truth of our lives, it's just, he's in a whole different place. And my mom is too. My mom met my father when she was 13. She's now 76. It's 13. That's all she knew was him. I think she did not understand, like, oh yeah, it's not normal for your husband to beat the tar out of you. That's just what she was accustomed to.
Yeah. She just went along with it.
It's very sad because so many people will sit back and say, well, why didn't you just leave? Or why didn't you just do this? And it's like, it's never that easy. I called the police on my father so many times. I put one incident of that in the book, and that was the first time that I had to do it. I did it many times after that, and we got nothing. The police would show up and be like, knock it off. Okay, everybody go back to what you were doing. Nothing. So he knew he was untouchable.
Yeah. And he used that. He used that confidence.
Absolutely.
And knowing that he had more influence, more way to hold you under that control, that you can't get any help. You've got to deal with me.
We had nobody to go to. I mean, we really had nobody. My grandma was like rescue her time to time when she would come into town. It was like, oh, I felt safe when she was there because he didn't act up for her. My grandma took my dad in when he was 13. That's how he met my mom. His mother threw him out to go live with his father because they were divorced. My dad was living with his father, and my grandpa had gotten remarried, and his new wife was not taking it from my dad. And she's like, you're out. So he was living under a bridge in Willow Springs, Illinois at 13. So, I mean, he had rough stuff. And somebody had told my grandma, there's a kid down there, you got to go get him. My grandma was, you could just use this term too. She's a good Christian woman. I mean, she was solid. She's like, I'm going down there. And she got him and brought him home and partially kind of raised him. So like he did not, he actually respected her. So when she dressed him down, it affected him. So yeah. Because I know you had brought that up about my grandma. And I said, yeah, she partially raised him. And for whatever reason, like he respected her and I think he feared her a little bit. If you would have known her, you would have feared her too. She was a very loving person, but man, you could be 20 feet from her. And if you're acting up and she told you to knock it off and you didn't, you would get a slipper in the head. I mean, she could throw a slipper across a room like an Olympic gold medalist. I mean, bam, hit you right in the head. She did not take anything, but it was rooted in love. Her discipline was rooted in love, or my father's wasn't even discipline. My father's abuse was rooted in power and control.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Serena Williams, and I'm healthier on Ro. I've lost 34 pounds in a year with GLP-1s, diet, and exercise. On Ro, you can access GLP-1 options, including the first FDA-approved GLP-1 pill for weight loss. Go to ro.co/journey to see if you qualify. 14 to 20% average weight loss in 1 year in non-diabetics with obesity or overweight with a weight-related medical condition versus 2.2% to 3.1% in placebo arm. RX only. To stay informed about serious side effects, go to ro.co/safety.
I noticed also that your dad was, at times, that the flip side of the psychopathy, so charming, so engaging.
Oh, yes.
He could put that mask on.
Oh, yes. Yes. When he was working, so he worked for a company, and I had mentioned this before, called Electromotive. And Electromotive is owned by General Motors, and they make locomotive engines. And his job there, he was doing electroplating of those engine parts. Number one product they use in electroplating is potassium cyanide. So he had access to this. And at that job, I cannot tell you in my life when I used to still live in that area, I would run into people and they would see the last name Droz and they'd be like, "Are you Danny's son?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh my God, I worked with him at Electromotive. He's so great. He's wonderful." And I'm like, you're talking about the same guy, right? There's not two of them there. But on the police department, Evil Dan really came out when he was a police officer. I found this out when I was writing the book. I was interviewing anybody I could reach out to and find who knew us, knew my dad, knew the family, worked with any of, anybody who had any contact with the family. So I reached out to a friend of mine that I've known since kindergarten. And I was like, do you remember my dad? And she's like, "Not really. I saw him, but I don't really remember him." She's like, "He was a cop, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm just investigating some stuff." And I never told anybody what I was looking into because I didn't want to bias anybody's opinion or, what they were going to find. And she's like, "Well, you know what?" She's like, she has family that are police. So she reached out to like her cousin and said, "Hey, can you run this guy's name and see what comes up?" Just out of curiosity. My father, as a police officer, is on what's called the Brady list. And the Brady list is a list of police officers who are not allowed to testify in court because they have done something to put them on this Brady list, and they therefore cannot be trusted as a witness in court. So my father's name is on the Brady list. So I believe something happened in the Lyons Police Department to where he got Brady listed. And what that is, I don't know. I'm going to find out though.
Yeah, especially if it was in court, it'll be a transcript somewhere.
Got to be something somewhere. And it's very locked down, but I'll figure out how to get to that. I'll find out. And I've talked to some of the people that he's worked with on the police department and the fire department. a lot of the police officers would not reach back out to me. I think they know that he's dirty. He was a dirty cop. There was one guy who worked with my dad on the fire department. And what he told me is profound. I wrote this in the book. We had a conversation, probably about an hour and a half, about my dad. And he had very objective opinion about my dad because he knew my dad a little bit later. He's like, yeah, your dad was nice. We did this, we did that. I was around when you kids were there, blah, blah, blah. My mom used to cut his hair in the basement, And then we got done and I said, do you have any idea what I'm investigating? He thought for a minute. No, I don't know. I can't say I do. He's like, objectively, I have no idea what you're investigating. And I said, okay. And I wasn't going to tell him either. So we were getting ready to end the conversation. He goes, wait, before we go, I need to tell you two things. I'm like, oh, what? He said, if I were you, I would get your father's military records because I think you might find something in there. Number one. Number two, he said, you need to know. This is where you get goosebumps. Your father had a very deep knowledge of chemicals and chemistry. I'm like, why did he tell me this? He didn't know. I know. Hair stood up. Why are you telling me this? He does not know that I was investigating the Tylenol murders. And in fact, when I got the beta version of the book done before I signed with the publisher, I sent it to him. I said, okay, are you ready to know what I was looking into? He read the whole thing and he got done. And he sent me a message back of this, like somebody's head going, not shocked at all, not surprised. He said, I told you, your father knew chemicals and chemistry. So, and I'm so glad I had the conversation with him because I did get my father's military records. And it's mostly pages of black. It's very redacted. Pages. I mean, I see when he left for the military, I see where he did his basic training. And I talked about this in the book because my father had told us his military stories 1,000 times. The interesting part, though, that never really played into this as much until I had that aha moment was he kind of went off the grid. And it's all redacted, where he was, dates, everything is in black. He had told us at the time, and this was in 1969, he went to Oakland. And he said while he was in Oakland, he was trained basically, in his words, I was trained as an assassin. I was trained as a sniper, and I was trained with poison.
Oh, boy.
And he said he learned that in Oakland. And then he also did explosive ordnance disposal, which is EOD, they call it. And he did that little bit of training with that in Oakland and then in Maryland. And I'm telling you what, like that, I'm remembering his stories about the poison and I'm like, oh my God. So when I had this conversation with my mom and she's like, oh, I know that he was trained with poison and rifles and bombs. And she said, and then she's crying. Obviously, this is horrible for her. She's crying and she tells me, she said, when he left the military, he promised me he left that life behind him. He pulled the wool over her eyes for their whole marriage. I mean, he let her see what he wanted her to see. And it's sad. I feel bad for my mom because I feel like, her whole life with him has been a hologram. It wasn't real. And she's like, I don't even know if he loved me. I don't know that if he loved you guys. So my mom, after all of this, we've had many, many, many deep conversations about this. And, she's taken all his pictures down in the house and she cries because she's like, my heart breaks for those people. And she said, but my heart also breaks for my children because she's like, I 100% did not know the extent. She's like, when I left to go to school or I left for work or I left to go to the grocery store, I assumed that my children would be safe with their father. Even though I knew he could turn on a dime, she's like, I always thought my kids would be safe with him. And most of the time when he was abusing us, and I'm using the word abuse very broadly, he was abusing us was when she wasn't around. He didn't act like that when she was around. He would beat her when she was around. He'd beat up on her, but when she was gone, he took it out on us, the three of us. And it was horrible.
Yeah. Think about it. Were you going to go to her and say, Daddy did this or whatever?
Oh my God.
And then put her in that.
Right. Well, and here's the interesting thing with that. So my cousin, I talk about my cousin Sherry in the book, and I adore her. She's like my sister. She had spent a lot of time with us after her sister died. Her sister was killed in a car accident. So she spent a lot of time with us, and she's had her own experiences with him, with the gun to the head. And she never told us about that. He used to do Aikido, which is a martial art, and he was a black belt. And he had those nunchucks. and he would chase after her with the nunchucks to scare her. And so one time she grabbed him out of his hand and pulled him away, and he attacked her on the ground. So she's like 13, 14 years old, maybe 15, attacked her on the ground and was like, I will kill you if you ever pull something like that again. She never told us this.
I'm saying, who would?
Right. She never said anything about this till I started the book. And then I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what he did to us. And when she talked to my mom about this, my mom, of course, is crying. And she's like, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you ever say this? And you know what? It's like everything clicked then. She said, I was terrified of retribution. If I were to tell you, you would have said something to him and it would have blown up and he would have came after me. And then my cousin also said, she's like, I did not say anything to you because my cousin's father, my Uncle Paul was an amazing man. Sherry said, she's like, my father would have driven up from Independence, Missouri to Chicago and killed him if he knew what he did to me. So she was like, I never said anything. You know, you just kept it inside. You didn't deal with it. And that's what we all did.
Well, that was that era.
Yes.
Growing up too, there was a lot of that going on.
Yes.
It's like just transitioning between, well, that's family business.
Mm-hmm.
That's none of our business. Discipline your family the way you want. But starting to make that transition, that child abuse is starting to really be paid attention to, and there's trainings and.
Yeah. Because I put it in the book about like when her sister Karen was killed in a car accident. It's a horror story in itself. It was homecoming night. A drunk driver smashed into the car. All four of the teenagers died instantly. When that happened in 1978, the way that was handled was like, okay, Karen's gone. We won't be seeing. This is what my parents told me. Karen died. We won't be seeing her grandma's house anymore, and don't ever mention her name. And that's how we lived our life. I was like, you couldn't talk about it. You just didn't. Especially if Sherry was around, you never said it. And Sherry is about 7 years older than I am. And it's only been recently that she will even say her sister's name. She's carried this that long. So, I mean, it was a different era. And I try to explain that to people. Like, it was a different era. Things were different. With news coverage, I mean, to me, that's a huge thing because people will ask me like, well, didn't you see this on the news or didn't you hear this? I'm like, no. In 1982, if you wanted to watch the news, then you sat yourself in front of the TV at the right time, or you didn't see it. We didn't VCR it or DVR it, or they didn't have streaming. You know, you wanted to watch the news, you sat there and watched the news, or you read the newspaper. And we really did none of those in our house. We were not news watchers, and we did get the Sunday paper every week because I used to walk down and get it from the store. But that was it. As far as I know, that was it.
Yeah, the group that's grown up with 24/7 news coverage on 2,700 different channels, and you can get this version and that version. No, you got your newspaper in the morning.
Yep.
They even had afternoon and evening editions of the newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember.
That's how news was out there.
Yep. Yeah. If you didn't participate in that, you didn't know. And when the Tylenol murders were happening, I mean, I was aware. I knew something was going on because people talked. People talked outside. People talked in the grocery stores. Kids talked about it at school. But we didn't have any news coverage until I wrote about this in the book. And this is literally, it is burned and seared and scarred into me. We were watching the news. I was in the living room. My father was behind me in his chair. And at this point, like, I was trying to avoid him. So he came and he sat down. He's like, put on channel 7, which was ABC News. I remember. He's like, put on channel 7, because we didn't even have a remote control then. So I was the remote control. I put on channel 7, and I'm thinking, like, how do I get out of here? I don't even want to be in the room with him anymore. My hair would stand up when I was around him. So we're sitting there, and here's the scene. There's a Catholic church. There are 3 coffins there. There is a priest sprinkling holy water onto the coffin. It turns out that was the Janus family, the 3 members of the Janus family who died from the poison. And my father wanted to watch this that night. That is seared into me. He's like, put on channel 7. We're watching this, and I'm sitting watching the TV, and I'm maybe a little bit of an empath. I don't know, but I'm feeling like I can feel the pain. I can feel that sorrow coming through the TV waves at me. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, did these people die from the poison? I'm thinking this. And I'm like, oh my God, like it was hitting me so hard. And the room was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. And behind me, I can hear the breathing change. And I knew, I was like, oh, maybe he's feeling this. Maybe he's feeling this too. Maybe this is upsetting to him. And the breathing changes and he sits there, and I won't swear on your show. I'll just say something different. He said, great. 3 effing holy Catholic martyrs. And I sat there and I'm watching this funeral on TV, and this is his reaction behind me. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, just take a breath. Just take a breath and just get out of here, because this isn't good. Nope, I didn't do that. I turned around and I said, can you tell me exactly what does that mean? And he's like, none of your effing business is what it means. And I remember standing up and I was like screaming at him, like, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? What is wrong with you? Like, who says something like that? And I said, no, what does that mean? And you know what he said to me? I put this in the book. He said, you know what? If you're so effing smart, you'll figure it out one day. And here we are. And
you did.
I did. And he had said that to me a few times. He had talked one time about killing people, and he was a little tipsy. And I put this in the book. This was years later. And I'm like, okay, wait, who did you kill? That's not important. I'm kind of skirting the issue. I'm like, no, who did you kill? No, not going to tell me. He changed the subject. And I'm like, no, seriously, let's get back to my question. Who did you kill? And he said, you know what? It's not important. If you're so effing smart, you'll figure it out someday. And then again, here we are. But that was the night. Okay, this is super important in the book, and I don't think I emphasized it enough in the book. This is a super important part for anybody who's going to read this book. That happened in 1988 when we had that odd conversation. I was going out with friends. We had this really dark conversation. I got home. Next morning, I was like, you know what? I got to write about this conversation, because I had started keeping track of things with him. I always knew, like, I think he has done something or several things, and I started keeping a list. And in that list, I had written about the Bussey Woods experience, the Lincoln Park Zoo experience. I had started just keeping track of things. No notes in there saying, I think he did this or I think he did that. All I did was keep track. And I was like, you know what? I've got to write about this conversation, because I wanted like the date recorded. Like, we had a conversation on this date and he said he killed people. I go to get my journal. I had it hidden really well. Gone. The journal's gone. Oof. The journal's gone, and another book was missing from my room. And I was like, oh my God, he was down here last night. I think he took my journal. 2019 comes. He starts sending threatening messages to my husband. He's like, I have a journal of Joey's here, and it's very interesting. I can't wait to show it to you. But we were not talking at that time, so that was a threat. That was threatening. He had this journal where I had all of this stuff in there, and I can guarantee you that journal has been incinerated, because I had all these dates and things down, and I was going back even past 1982. I had written about the incidents where he was like shaking my brother in the crib. He was, shaking him because he was crying. I mean, I wrote down all kinds of things, and it's gone. So 2019, he sent those threatening messages to my husband. And then not long after that, he sent some more messages to my husband, and he said, I know who you are, JR. You can run, but you can't hide. Because at that point, I had changed my last name. I stripped off his last name. I was like, I don't want anything to do with this name. And he found that out. And he said, I know who you are, JR. You can run, but you can't hide. And then the next message he sent my husband was, I hope you guys have a good New Year's, because it's going to be the last for one of you. Like, who does that? He knew. I think he was thinking in his mind in 2019 that I'm going to figure this out. And he had conversations with my brother at that same time saying, I think Joey's going to blame me for something. I think he's going to blame me for something. And then on his deathbed, he said, I know I'm going to get blamed for something, so I'm just going to admit it now. I mean, everything kind of just keeps going in a circle. It's like 1 + 1 = 2.
Now, I think I know the answer to this.
Mm-hmm.
He does make this deathbed confession, and they are very poignant, very meaningful. Why? I don't believe all of a sudden this man was regretful. No way.
I agree with you.
No way. Was it, because I've wrestled with this one, was it he knew you were onto him? There's no question in my mind. Was it to confirm that? Did he, I hate to say give you the crumb, but did he want to confirm that? Did he want ownership of it? Because look what I did. I got away with it. Which,
Yep.
I mean, what do you think?
It's a combination of all of that. I do honestly, and there's no love lost between us, but I do feel in those last days of his life that I think he had some regret about this. I mean, because my brother said that he was crying when he talked about the 3 Marys. He was crying. So I do feel like at the end, this was hitting him. But I also feel like, my father was training us, all of us, taking us in the woods and stalking people. And I mean, he taught me how to kill somebody with a pen. Do you know what I mean? Like he taught us all of these insane things. Like he was training us for something. I honestly think along the way, this was like a game. Like he was trained for us. He was training us how to figure out that it was him. And since we hadn't figured it out yet, he dropped it in our lap, basically like, yeah. And then he told me, he said, if you know that I did something and you don't do anything about it, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're the monster. So basically he was putting this in my lap and saying, okay, I'm giving this to you. I got nothing to worry about. I'm on my way out. I mean, he knew death was pending. I mean, it was not long after that he actually died. He knew it was coming. And he trained us for this. He wanted us to know. And then at the end, I think he was, as sick as this is, I think he was proud he did it and he got away with it. Everybody focused in on James Lewis so much. And I think my dad was like, goodness, I'm glad because the heat's not on me. But he did destroy everything in his lair. That's in the book. Right after the murders, when they were kind of focusing in on James Lewis, he burned off everything. So I honestly think when he did this is 100% what I think. When he did this, he was sure he'd get away with it, which he did. He knew what he was doing. He knew how to pull this off. So he got away with it. The thing that threw him off, I do not believe that he ever thought they would figure out it was the Tylenol that quickly.
I agree.
And it was only because of a nurse. Her name was Helen Jensen. She was at the house in Arlington Heights where the 3 people had taken the Tylenol and 3 people died in a very short span of time. And I imagine it was total chaos. And there was people at the house. And I think, honestly, they were looking for a gas leak. They were looking for poisoned food. They were looking for something in the house that would have caused this. And she saw the Tylenol bottle out and she's like, So she counted how many were in there and there were 6 missing and 3 people gone. And so she goes, it's got to be the Tylenol. And they're like, what? No way. A woman in 1982 going up against all the boys club, she was not allowed to say that. No, you're crazy. You're just a crazy woman. She was correct. So another officer who was there, I think he was a fireman, had said, you know what? I heard about a girl yesterday in Elk Grove Village who died after she took a Tylenol. And it was them where they were like, it's got to be the Tylenol. And that's like the quote was, it has to be the Tylenol. And that's when everything kicked into high gear. That's when he started sweating. That is when my father started sweating. As soon as they knew that, bam, everything was burned. He's watching the news, watching the funerals. So this is interesting. My husband is in healthcare and he has a friend in Chicago who lives in Arlington Heights and she's a nurse. Well, she knows Helen Jensen. So she told Helen Jensen, she's like, my friend Craig's husband just wrote a book about those murders. And she's like, what? She wanted to talk to me. So I had a conversation with Helen Jensen and I got goosebumps in a good way this time.
I'm getting goosebumps.
Let me tell you what. She's a doll. First of all, she's 88 years old now. She was 44 when this happened. So that was fully a lifetime ago for her. I had this conversation with her fully knowing she's 88. So, I didn't talk as fast as I usually do. And I kind of really broke it down for her. This is what she told me at the end. She said, honey, I am 88 years old and I feel like now I can put this to bed.
Whoa.
So I told her, give me your address. I'm going to send you a signed copy of the book. And I did. And then she called me after that. Get this. She called me a few days later. This 88-year-old woman, she's like, honey, how are you doing with all of this? Are you okay? Like, how sweet is she? So it, to me was like, okay, that is like the best. I don't want to say the word compliment, but the best thing that I could hear is from the woman who's the one who figured this out, telling me now, this story makes the most sense out of anything I've ever heard. And she said, I feel like I can put this to bed now.
That's actually kind of the beautiful part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That she got to tie that up with a little bow and say, huh.
Yep. Honestly, and this is also, I put this in the book, but I didn't emphasize it like I'm going to now. I feel when he left us in Bussy Woods, and I am 100% certain that he put those pills in Elk Grove Village, Arlington Heights, and Schaumburg. I am 100% sure about that. I did the timings of how long it would take to get from one place to the next. There was a lot of extra time in there, and my father was very scheduled, meticulous. He didn't waste 1 second. I fully 100% believe if there are bottles anywhere that never got reported, or maybe somebody died and they didn't relate it to this, it was around Bussy Woods, and Bussy Woods was his ground zero, in my opinion. Putting the bottle, there was only one bottle found in the city of Chicago, and that was when we were at the zoo. He left us at the zoo. And then the other ones, when I saw on the map where they were, I was like, Winfield, that's right by where Randy and Mary live, my dad's brother and his wife, and then they have friends that live out there in Warrenville. And in 1982, Warrenville and Winfield were the middle of nowhere. It was just like, it was like the pastures out there. There was nothing. And just oddly enough, this one bottle appeared there when we were just there for an anniversary party. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it just, to me, it's so, like, again, 1 + 1 = 3. We were in all of those locations, and they were locations that we went to on a regular basis. Bussy Woods, the movie theater in Lombard, we were there all the time. My dad preferred to go to that theater. His brother's house and his friend's house out in Warrenville, we were always there. All of this, the only one that threw me off was the city. And I was like, no, we were there. In fact, he took me in that Walgreens and got a Coke that day. And I was talking about that in the book. Like, I remember this like it was yesterday. Like, why did he take me here? Why are we in Walgreens? We were just at the gas station. Why does he got to get a Coke here? What's up with him? And, I was watching.
Mm-hmm. That's that hypervigilance.
Yeah, you start watching, and any little crack you see, you watch out for it, because I'm telling you from my experience, like, it's the small cracks in somebody like that are the ones you need to look out for. The big cracks, if something big comes up, you can run, but those little things, that's what you have to watch. You have to watch for those little inconsistencies. I mean, and there were tiny little things where nobody else would say, that's not odd. That is odd, because that is not how we did things.
Exactly. Your family was doing their own thing. That's for certain.
Absolutely.
So why did he do this? I know he can. I know he has the skill set. I know he has the training. He's got the psychopathy.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because in the FBI profile, it said there was probably some kind of triggering event. Is there something that you remember?
Oh, absolutely. Again, there's a lot of things that are in the book that I feel now, after it's done and published, I'm like, I got to emphasize this. So my whole life growing up, my father had told me a story about how he drank this sulfa medication under his grandmother's sink. He died. According to him, he died. And he was in the hospital for weeks because he was allergic to sulfa, which they didn't know at that point. And he told me he died. He said, I died. I remember crossing over, but I came back. And he's like, I've never came back the same. So when you get into 1981, all these years later, there's a part in the book where my brother got into a bottle of liquid children's Tylenol. And it was red, and it was under the bathroom sink. And my brother had it. And my father, I believe my father had a flashback to himself drinking a red liquid medicine and dying. And he's had a grievance with this his whole life, I believe, because he always talked about, like, stuff isn't sealed right. If you wanted to do something, you could put poison in milk. It's so easy to open a bottle of milk. I mean, he told us this stuff. And I feel like he had a grievance over that. And right before the murders, and I've documented this, right before the murders, I talk about it in the book, they were starting to advertise children's co-Tylenol, which was like a children's cold and Tylenol formula. And it was caplets. It was little pills. And they were, I believe, orange flavored. I'm not positive on that, but I think they were orange flavored. And he was losing his mind. they didn't have childproof caps. And he said, these MFers are going to kill a kid. He said, these MFers are going to kill a kid. And he was like, I think in his mind, and this is 100% true, in his mind, he did the world a favor. Because after this happened, now there's 4 or 5 seals on everything you want to open. He did the world a favor. And you know what? So what? 7 people died? Big deal. In his mind, that's just collateral damage. Look at all the people who didn't die because we have these caps and these seals on now. In his mind, he did the world a favor. It's interesting now. Like friends of mine will text me, picture of something that has 4 or 5 seals on it. And they're like, tell your dad thanks. But they're like, yeah, your dad did this. He went out when he died thinking he did the world a favor. And that was the thing with him, was he was always the hero in his own story. No matter how violent or horrible it was, he was the hero. And in his mind, he died a hero because this happened. He made this happen.
Yeah.
It's twisted. Oh. It's twisted and it's dark, and I'm still unraveling it. I'll be unraveling it the rest of my life.
I think you're right. Because there's always going to be something else, another layer of focus.
There's so many. Yes. I told my brother, I was like, you need to really focus on self-care now, because he's in a very good place. I'm like, you need to keep yourself in this good space and focus on self-care because we got work to do. There's more things coming. And when I talk to these other situations that I believe my father was involved with my brother, he's like, oh yeah, he talked to me about that. I know about that. And so we're comparing notes now. And I'm telling you, there's more. There is more. I tell people, I'm like, this book, you're going to a fancy party, right? And you walk through the door and there's somebody with a tray of hors d'oeuvres and a tray of champagne. This book about the Tylenol murders is just one of the hors d'oeuvres on that tray. There's other trays of hors d'oeuvres, and then you got a 7-course meal behind it. There's more. There is more. It's unfortunate to say like this is the tip of the iceberg, but there is so much more. Maybe not on the scale of this, but there are so much more that have his fingerprints all over it. And now after I finished with the book, people are coming out of the woodwork. I'm telling you what, like I get messages all the time like, I remember your dad said blah, blah, blah. I'm like, where were you when I was writing this shit? But it's kind of like, the book is done and it's published, but it's also like to be continued. There's more.
I was going to ask you if volume 2 is coming.
Well, this book, I think, is going to be like a chapter in a much bigger book. There's a few things, and I can't even get into it now, but I have a website. It's just josephcibelli.com, and it has my book on there. But I've been kind of dropping little things on there of what I'm working on now because I'm putting that out there. So if people know anything, shoot me a message and tell me what you know. I'm asking for help. There's more. I have my PhD. I'm almost done with law school, but I feel like, I told so many friends this, and I'm like, I think this is my niche. I think, defendant dad is going to be like my number one client. Like I got to figure out everything he did. I'm like the prosecutor, and I'm going to find out everything that he did and everything that's got his fingerprints on it. And that's going to take me the rest of my life. Some of the things that he was involved in could actually put a target on my own back. And I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm in my 50s. I lived a good life. I'm happy. If somebody blows me away because they don't like what I'm writing, I'm okay with it. But yeah, there's some stuff out there that it's pretty deep and it's dark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned, everybody. But yeah, on the website, josephcibelli.com, I've got some pictures in there that I don't know why they didn't end up in the book. I mean, that should have been in the book. Why didn't you put that in the book? I told the publisher. So I've got them on my website. I also have them on Facebook. I'm not a social media lover, but I have my husband set up a page for me so I can put things on there. But there's pictures on that website that connect into the book. So if you've read the book and you look at these pictures, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. You'll be like, oh, dang, that's what it is?
No, I have a blog. I'm going to link the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your site, the pictures, the whole thing. I'll have everything there. So my listeners can go out and buy the book, people. If this conversation has not convinced you that you have to buy this book.
And I'm like, and anybody listening, if you know anything about Daniel Droz from Illinois, please reach out to me. I'm telling you, like there's so much. But yeah, if you read the book and you really read it, and then you go look at these pictures on my website, you'll be like, wow, mind blown. Mind blown. Yeah. And then I did put on there a little bit of what's what I'm working on now. Just a little tidbit, really just, I call it a seed, just like a little seed. And I did it not to really tease people by any means, because this is another murder case. I don't want to, I don't want to sensationalize it, but I want to put it out there because somebody somewhere knows something.
Yes.
Somebody somewhere with any crime, somebody knows something, but people don't talk.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I put that out there. So if anybody knows anything, just shoot me a message on the website. I'll get it and I'll respond.
My response is it's time to talk.
Mm-hmm.
It's time.
And somebody called me while I was working on this book. I put it in the book about a number from Springfield, Ohio. I'm typing in the book, right? My cell phone rings and it's from Springfield, Ohio. And I'm like, probably a telemarketer or something. I pick it up. Hello? Nothing. Very quiet. Then a voice pops in. It's kind of like a scramble, like a high pitch. And it says, "You're on the right track. Your dad did it." Hang up. I call the number back. I took screenshots of it. I called that number back 20 times and it was like, "The number you've reached has been disconnected." So it was a burner number. Somebody got a burner number. But here's the question. And this is the one that's burning in my brain. Looking at this like with a lawyer eye, my dad did what? You're on the right track. Your dad did it. What did my dad do? Are you talking about the Tylenol murders? Are you talking about something else? They didn't clarify what it was. And I want to know what it was. So
yes.
Hopefully we'll find out.
Oh, I hope so. Please,
Yes.
Got to keep me in the loop now.
I will, definitely. This was amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, listen, I want you to have a bestseller, and I want the police to look into this. I want some, I hate to use that word closure, but I want the families to have some peace and to know what happened to their loved ones. That's what I want.
There is nothing else that states anything of this nature. I mean, it's just been a ghost hunt. People are hunting for a ghost. And I'm like, no, this is what happened behind the scenes. People need to know. And I do want closure for the families. And I also want some closure for my own family too, because we've dealt with a lot over this time, and doing this has made it okay that we can talk about it. Yeah. Closure for everybody, and moving forward is on the agenda.
Move forward with some answers and lighter hearts.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thank you for doing this. Please say hello to your husband for me. Guys, you have to buy the book, The Tylenol Murders, Father's Confession to His Son.
Love that. And then josephcibelli.com. That's got the pictures. It should have been in the book. So
and check out the pictures for Joseph.
Yes. So, because I have my podcast on that page too. So people go in there, can hear the podcast. So thank you.
All right. This has just been awesome. You have been a stellar guest.
Oh, thank you. You've been a stellar host. I love it. I'll be back anytime. Well, I'll let you know what's coming up next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right then, man.
Thanks, my love.
Take care. Well, there you are. It's a lot to think about, the possibility that Daniel Droz is the Tylenol Killer. I think Joseph and I could have talked another hour about his book and his father's confession. And I believe he is not writing some sensational book to make a buck. I hope you got that impression too. Joseph Cibelli believes the evidence leads to his father, who is a serious and reasonable suspect for the Tylenol murders. We do take deathbed testimony as sacrosanct. If a victim identifies her attacker and dies, we believe those words and that identification. I do think that we should take this confession seriously. Droz's comment about the three Marys, who refers to Mary Kellerman, Mary Reiner, and Mary McFarland. Wow. Well, I have to tell you too, I watched Joseph's eyes very carefully as we were talking, and he was actively recalling memories, not creating some kind of narrative. And I believe he is truthful. So why would anyone randomly poison 8 bottles of Tylenol with cyanide? This perpetrator is a classic example of a set and run killer. This type of spree killer uses a distance weapon, such as poisoning, arson, or explosives, to kill victims while the killer is definitely somewhere else. Not present, he doesn't see his victims, he never witnesses them dying. It's not about that. So the Tylenol bottles were scattered all across to different locations in the Chicago area. And I think Joseph Cibelli makes a rather good case that the link to these locations is Bussy Woods. This type of killer prefers anonymity and seeks to successfully escape justice. And that is held until now, unless Joseph Cibelli is correct. Only a confession right before his death brought this to the forefront, because Droz's ego didn't allow him to die without taking credit for his perfect murder. He just couldn't go in silence. And Daniel Droz would be enjoying the looming infamy of people knowing who he was, what he did, and how he escaped justice. Most set-and-run killers have 2 or more victims, in this case 7, and will choose 2 or more distinct locations. Unlike most mass murderers who may die at the scene of the crime, set-and-run killers prioritize self-preservation and escape. A famous example of this is Timothy McVeigh, who enacted the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing at the Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people, including 19 children who were attending America's Kids Daycare Center. Over 680 people were injured. A set-and-run killer has several possible primary motives, and these can certainly overlap. Vengeance and retribution is most common, that he feels a deep sense of injustice or has some long-standing grudge against a specific group of people, an institution, or society at large. Externalization of blame. Corporations, government, the social system are responsible for his personal failures or misery. Sadistic satisfaction. Some may derive pleasure from the widespread panic and fear that their anonymous acts cause, rather than the deaths themselves. Power and control. By creating the perfect crime, they feel a sense of intellectual superiority and of omnipotence over the public and authorities. Ding, 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 ding. I think we definitely have a winner here. And one more, your profit or your extortion, which is kind of rare, but killings are a means to an end, such as extorting money from a company, as we saw James Lewis attempt to do poorly. Before he died, suspect James Lewis appeared in the 2025 Netflix docuseries, Cold Case, The Tylenol Murders, which I suggest you watch. Lewis continued to deny any involvement in the murders until his death. And at the time, there was another suspect, Roger Arnold, who was investigated after a tip said he was discussing cyanide at a local bar. After exhuming his body in 2010, forensic testing failed to produce a DNA match. So, listening to Joseph Cibelli, I realized that his entire childhood was spent in the shadow of a walking, uncontainable cauldron of rage and manipulation, a man who reputedly gave his wife multiple black eyes and concussions, dangling toxic chemicals near his youngest children. Beholding this seems to have led Cibelli to develop a finely tuned radar to the rhythms of his father's temperament. That is the hypervigilant child who becomes a better observer than their abusers ever know. So I encourage you to read The Tylenol Killer, A Father's Confession to His Son. It is a compelling theory, and it is worthy of your time. I can only hope that the Arlington Heights Police Department reaches out to Joseph sooner than later. And I humbly suggest that the Arlington Heights Police Department require a DNA sample from Joseph, because the DNA of the Tylenol Killer exists. Let forensic genetic genealogy work its magic to either confirm or rule this out. And that is a wrap. Thank you for listening. I see you as you hear me. If you enjoy my podcast, please share it with friends and family, and find me on X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and repost. You can email me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com and let me know what you think of this new book. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss my next True Crime Book Club trilogy, The Caretaker's Game by Charles Wallace. This is not about homicides or serial killers, but it still explores a frightening and devastating crime committed against some of the most vulnerable members of our society, the elderly, especially those suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's-like illnesses. When adult children, often living a goodly distance away from their parent, discover that the parent needs assistance, finding a reliable caregiver is crucial, allowing some semblance of peace of mind, knowing that their loved one is in good hands. Charles Wallace's mother, Joelle Fleming, her caretaker, smiled, saw to everything, and quietly seized control of Joelle Fleming's life and legacy. Charles Wallace and his siblings were completely unaware that anything was wrong until it was too late. Over the course of 3 years, more than $1 million vanished from their fiercely independent mother's accounts after she placed her trust in her caregiver, Esmeralda Gomez. This shocking revelation sent Charles on a quest to uncover the truth about what happened to his mother. This is not a tale of woe, but you will empathize with Charles as he sifts through emails, accounts, finding passwords, checking out the professionals involved, and trying to hold them to account in search of answers. And it serves as a cautionary tale that everyone with an aging parent should heed. I know I did. The caregiver's game is part forensic investigation, part family memoir, and a practical warning for families with elderly parents. A special thank you to my Murder Shelf Book Club Patreon group for helping me to choose this somewhat unusual true crime book, which is essential for protecting a vulnerable segment of our society. I see you as you hear me. See you next time. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.